Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining me on the Slice of Healthcare podcast. I'm your host, Jared Taylor. Today I'm joined by Gaurang Choksi, the founder and CEO at
Hey,
Violet.
Jared.
How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having us on the podcast.
I'm excited for us to chat.
Likewise.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited for us to chat today. Super excited to have you on. We'll keep it short and sweet for the listeners today. Really want them to get to know you and the company. If we could start off, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your background. I know they would as well, and then we'll dive more into Violet.
Yeah. So I'm Gaurang. I'm based in New York City. A little bit about me. I'm a gay man, an immigrant, and I grew up on Medicaid. And I share those vital lived experiences because they've really shaped my professional journey. But professionally, the past 4 years, I spent building Oscar Health, where I really joined as an early employee and scaled the company up to 1,500. But more notably, I led the LGBT affinity group at Oscar. And one of the biggest pain points we had was our patients would come to us or our members and say, how do I find a gay doctor? And similarly, in our ERG for communities of color, we would often hear, how do I find a black doctor? And so with Violet, we're building something truly innovative, which is standardizing the concept of cultural competence.
And it's not that this is like a new, I feel like this is more talked about today than it has even years ago. Or if it was talked about years ago, it wasn't that the light wasn't shined on it as much as it is today, right? So it when was the point that you realized that this needs to be a company and Violet needs to be born?
Yeah, it was truly about a year and a half ago. What we were seeing was a lot of personalization in healthcare, right? We've seen myriad of venture-backed digital health companies verticalizing by condition or community. But what we were really seeing and what I really cared about was how do we bring the same kind of personalization to people that are not just commercially insured? We love the fact that there's all these exceptional venture-backed digital health organizations delivering truly amazing care, but how do we make sure that the 1 out of 2 Americans on Medicaid or Medicare can actually find the right providers for them? And so with Violet, the real thesis is let's really standardize cultural competence, which has been talked about for decades. Health equity has been talked about for decades, but let's actually codify it into a platform so we can A, have clear pathways for clinicians to grow, but B, actually have a standard that everybody else in the industry can reference.
And that's your tagline, right? It's you actually said it best. I'll let you say it. Tagline that you go with when you go to partners and customers. Um, how did you end up coming up with that? And also, how did you end up? So I want to go through a little bit about branding, which we haven't done much on this show, but I love the name. I love the color codes that you use for Violet, which obviously makes it Violet, right? But can you tell us, like, obviously the tagline is actually self-explanatory based on what you started the company to focus in on, but how did you come up with the name? Why Violet?
Yeah, we coming from Oscar, I think I really understood the value of strong branding and, frankly, building a brand that has its own identity. Something that we truly feel has been a failure in healthcare is technology that's made for clinicians and care delivery professionals often isn't really made for engagement or consumers. A lot of times, healthcare technology is very functional and lackluster in branding. And something we care about with Violet is we really want to be the source of truth and the brand that comes to top of mind when talking about health equity. And so for us, branding really has been a vital piece of our history. And with Violet, we love the fact that it could be a name, it could be really a color, and more so, there is a history that pertains to the LGBT community, which is lesbians in England used to wear violets to denote their sexuality. And we really love the concept that we love the fact that the brand has its own identity and authority, but more so, there's a history that we can tie into as well.
Interesting. Yeah, it's I like how you kind of circle back to that, and it's easy to remember. I mean, half the time people that come on the podcast, they'll have these names, and I'm like, I have to ask them, how do I even say that, right? You make up it the way that it sounds. Yours is really straightforward. Now we've kind of. I usually always ask three things. I ask about the why, how, what of the company. You kind of already gave us the why. You already gave us really the what. Can you talk us through kind of what you're willing to share, how Violet works today?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll preface by sharing some of the current landscape in healthcare. So, right now, when you're an insurance company or a provider organization, When patients come to you, usually the questions that we ask are, what's the insurance you have and when are you available and what specialty are you looking for? We don't really ask, what are the communities that you belong to or the cultural competencies that you really want in your clinician? And what we feel is that that's truly a disservice and to the patient ultimately and to the clinicians. And then what we're seeing a lot in the insurance space is we would get these roster files. So roster files are really just it's a yellow pages or it's a long list of all the doctors that are in a network that we rented. And there would often be a column for specialties where everybody would check the LGBT specialty box. But the truth is, one clinician would check the box because they're accepting of LGBT community members, and somebody else would check the box because they have a PhD in health disparities for the LGBT community. And it's truly a shame that our industry doesn't actually support different tiers of skilling for cultural competence. And so with Violet, what we're doing is really demystifying and standardizing what it means to be culturally competent. And so our platform, we currently partner with provider organizations like Brightline, like Steady MDs of the world, where we take the time to do three things. One, we take the time to really understand who is their care delivery team. And what we really care about is getting away from this historical concept of, hey, if you have lived experience, meaning you belong to one community, that's the community you're excelling at working with. We know lived experience is a big part of the equation, but there's other really relevant pieces. Like, what are the communities you've worked with in aggregate, or what are the communities you're passionate about, or the communities you've studied about? So all of this information goes into our platform where we go through a relative ranking process, and we really take the time to quantify cultural competence of that care delivery team. And the organic next step in terms of where we add value is we help upskill that team. For us, we're investing a lot in really, really engaging clinical education. But we know it's much more than memorizing facts and figures. Frankly, clinicians are exceptional at memorization. That's not the area we want to shine a light on. What we want to shine a light on is how do we provide really engaging case vignettes and stories of successful and unsuccessful interactions and make sure the team has the resources they need to have really engaging conversations about race, about ethnicity, about gender identity, about different cultures that are being left behind where there's unique disparities. And then the final thing we do is we recognize clinicians. So again, to sum up, we benchmark, upskill, and as clinicians are really learning and thriving, we recognize them both internally and externally. Our biggest goal is we're really the connective tissue in healthcare to help people and the whole industry really create identity-centered care journeys where we can actually finally say, here is all the communities that I'm a part of as a patient, get me the right clinician for me that's in network.
Thank you for sharing more, by the way. Really appreciate that. It's definitely, I feel like you're addressing a space that we've started talking more about over the last couple of years, but I don't know of any, any other platforms that, right now that were really addressing what you're addressing. So you really came in at the right time. You have some great partners. That being said, I know you want to create more of these lasting partnership relationships. What do you look for in a partner? Just so that if anyone in the audience is a potential partner, maybe they know to reach out and can see how they can work with you.
Yeah, we love partnering with provider organizations that truly want to ensure cultural competence is in their DNA. And what we mean by that is a lot of times, a lot of organizations we converse with, we know they're hiring for diversity. We love the fact that everybody is trying to truly build a diverse team that's in parallel to the communities they're serving. But beyond just hiring, if you're passionate about really making sure your team has the resources where they can keep growing and really having a platform that codifies that growth, that's exactly the types of partners that we love partnering with.
Great. And if anyone's interested, check out Violet at joinviolet.com, and I'm sure reach out to you on LinkedIn or some other social channel, right? If they're interested in connecting. What's next for Violet?
Yeah, we're quite a nascent company. So even though we have exceptional partners and version one of our platform live, we are preparing for a fundraise right now, and it's really about scale. So for really what's coming up in the next 18 months, we're closing out a financing round, and then we're continuing to ensure that we do have the brand authority and we are the standard for cultural competence across the whole industry. So truly lots and lots more partnerships coming up.
I look forward to hearing more and staying in touch. This is the first time you've been on the podcast. The goal is to have you on again real soon where we'll be able to dive into more about Violet and kind of some updates that have happened on the company. But thank you so much again for joining me on the podcast today. Wish you and your team the best of luck, and can't wait for interview number 2.
Thanks, Jared. Thanks for having me.